wait, before you build your next website or you pay someone to build for you, there are some things you absolutely need to understand. Because if you don't, you could waste money, you can waste time, you could still end up with a website that doesn't work properly. Because a lot of business owners have websites, but they don't even understand how those websites actually work. That's why in this video, I want to explain the website basics you must know as a business owner or even as a beginner website designer that's just going into the niche. So stay with me in this video to learn everything I'll be teaching you in website development. Now let's get started. What I'll be teaching you today is what a website really is. Quite simple for everybody. Then I'm going to explain you what the difference between front-end and back-end is, the types of, or let me say the mode of web development, different types of it. Then the domain names, what is the domain name, what is web hosting, and the types of hosting we have, and then how you're going to get started in your next website development project. Good. So as a business owner, quickly, why do you need to understand all these website basics? Why? Firstly, you need to understand them to make informed decisions, to make the right decision on the right solutions you need for your business. You need to understand this to work better with your developers. Then you need to understand the website basics so as to be able to grow your business online properly to stay up front 24/7. Then what is a website? What is a website? A website is a collection of pages, web pages that is stored on the server and accessed through the internet using a domain name. Just think of it of like you have a folders of pages stored in a particular server. Then if anybody wants to check what you have stored there, they just click on your domain name and type in on the Google, and then it brings out all the information you stored there to their page. So that is just simply the workflow of how it is. So the simple formula is just we have the domain plus the hosting plus the files, then your website showing up. Just simple as that. The domain plus the hosting plus the files will bring out your website. But first, let me talk about something very important in this website development that you need to know, which is the front end. What is the front end part of the website? The front end is just what your users see, what they get to see once they click your domain name. So the front end is everything users see and interact with when they visit your website. It's the visual layer that creates the user experience, the layout, the structure, the coloring, etc. And here we are, this is what it looks like, the front end. This is a website that's for digital marketing services. Then users can interact. If you want to click on start your journey, then it takes them to the next page. The interaction with your website is just basically what the front end is. This is where you can book a free audit and the likes. You can click on the get started, the contact. So basically every time you check on websites, any website, maybe Jumia, Amazon, and then you interact with the page, everything you see on the page is just what front end is. So, and a great tip you need to put in mind is that your front end is your user experience, and a great front end makes visitors to stay longer and convert better on your website. So, next I'm going to be explaining what backend really is. Backend is the power behind the scenes system that powers your website. It handles your data, logic, and functionality that users never see but always depend on. So now that I've said backend is basically what is working behind the scenes that powers your website. So what are the functions? There's the user login system where you have your users coming into your website. Then once they log in, the username and the password is saved and created as an account for a specific user, so that anytime the user wants to log in, it's going to be personalized to the user. That's just like the taking us to the next stage, which is the database management, storing and retrieving data, payment processing, and form submission. So quickly, I'll be demonstrating a backend workflow for you using a contact form. In this contact form, I'll be putting my name, John Doe. Let me use a random name. Then the email address. Then the service I want to offer. I need and the service I need an help with, and then I want to ask a question as my message, then I will click send. Now, get to understand this. The process whereby the message is sent is getting to the admin of the website, the owner of the website, and they get the message and then send you back a response is what a backend workflow really means. Just like an example, this and a very good example of how the backend operates, where you the things that happen behind the scene of the website, like the way you purchase some stuffs online, put your debit card or credit card, and then you are being debited, and then you are redirected to page where you get access to the product you are buying. That's how that's a very good example of how the backend workflow is. Therefore, in simple term, the difference between front end and back end is the front end is what the users interact with, while the back end is the behind the scenes things that happen behind the scenes to keep the website active and to make everything functional on the website. And then the technologies that are used for front end are basic stuff like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and many other programming languages. That's where we have the backend, the PHP, Node.js, MySQL, Python, and the likes. Now that I've briefly explained what the front end means and what the back end means, let me now dive deep into the development approach we have for websites. There are just few different ways websites is being built. The first and the traditional method is coding your website, building your website from scratch. This is where developers build websites using programming languages to create fully custom solutions. So this approach offers maximum control and flexibility. The developers make use of languages like the React and JavaScript, the CSS, HTML, and the likes to build your website from scratch, writing out the code. And it comes with a lot of advantages like fully customizable. When you have access to developers that can build this for you, you get to build it exactly the way you want your website and include all your information you want, the features rather. Then it's more powerful, it's better at performance, optimized code runs faster and smoother. Then you get your unique design, you get your website the way you want it to look, but it comes with some disadvantages as well. It requires programming skills. Let's say for example you as a business owner want to get to edit some things on your website, you may not be able to do that on your own except with the help of your developers. So you need programming skills to be able to edit anything on the website. So that's one disadvantage, and then it comes with higher costs. It comes with higher costs getting these developers to bid for you. Then there's maintenance required as well. So you need to be in touch with those developers and anytime there's any need for updates or to fix some technical stuff on your website. Then the next approach for web development is using CMS and then website builders. So the next development approach is CMS and website builders. CMS is content management system. In simple terms, CMS give you more control over your website than coding does. It allows people to build their websites without coding, with zero coding, and this approach is perfect for business owners who want control over their website. This way, you get to control your website better, you get to interact with it better without any knowledge of coding. Because in CMS, you get to use themes, which are pre-designed templates, and then you get to use plugins that add functionalities to your website. The very important feature of CMS and all this website builder is that they come with drag and drop feature. Example is Elementor in WordPress. This feature just means you are able to drag any element into your page. Let's say you want contact form in your website. All you just have to do is drag the form into the page, then it displays wherever everything you need to edit, and then boom, you are done editing your website, your contact form, and it's working perfectly instead of coding from scratch. Other examples of CMS are the most popular one, I guess, is WordPress, Then we have Wix, we have Shopify, Squarespace. Some are specialized for different website niches like e-commerce. Shopify is mainly for e-commerce websites and then many others. So the pros is just simple. It's easy for beginners. It's even quick to launch. Project that could have taken you up to like 3 months, 4 months is very possible you finish everything within 2 weeks with CMS. And then of course no coding is needed and some CMS also comes with hosting included. And then the cons is just that depending on the type of project you want to work on, depending on the complexity of the project you want, some may come with limited customization. That's just one of the biggest cons. What is a domain? What does it mean? A domain name is the address of your website on the internet. It's what people type into their browser to find you. It's just like your address where your house is located. So when anybody wants to come to visit you, you send them your address and they follow the address to locate your house. That's just like the best illustration I have for you for domain. So domain is what people type your URL address on the Google to locate your website. So they go on to the search engine, then type it and boom, they are on your website. Popular domains you know is we have google.com, like facebook.com. Once you type facebook.com, what happens? You are directed straight to the page of Facebook page. So why domains matter? Domains matter because they are easy to remember. Good, like facebook.com, in just a click you are there already. Then it builds brand recognition because it's coming with your one unique name. Therefore, it's only you that has access to that domain, to that URL. Then it builds brand recognition and trust and makes your business look professional. Then this brings us to the next um, part of the tutorial, which is web hosting. What is web hosting? Hosting in simple time is just where your website files are stored online. Remember in the earlier part of the video I said website is just like having all your files stored in a particular server. Then these files are being displayed back to the visitor or to the user by just sending a request to your domain. So web hosting is where your website files are stored online. It's like creating a space on a computer that's always connected to the internet. In short, your web hosting is where you store all your files, your website information online. Then if anybody wants to access it, it's gonna be through your domain name, which is your URL address. Then you might be wondering how do you get access to your hosting? There are a couple of web hosting platforms, web hosting companies online there that sell hosting packages to people. You can go on there to buy it and buy your domain as well and host your website on it. Then you start building. So this next slide I will be explaining different types of briefly explaining the different types of web hosting. I'll be dropping a more detailed video on this part later, but just briefly explaining it, we have shared hosting. Shared hosting is where different people get to share a particular hosting, just as the name is. So we have multiple websites on one server. Then we have the VPS hosting. This one is a virtual private server. It's dedicated resource. It has a root access available. Then it's scalable. It's easy to upgrade its resources. There are more pros and cons. Then the next we have a dedicated hosting, entire server just for you. Then we have a cloud hosting. This is multiple servers working together. Then briefly, I will be showing you different hosting companies that are available out there. There's Hostinja, there's Bluehost, there's Namecheap, there's SiteGround, there's GoDaddy, etc. In my next video, I'll be walking you through step by step how you can get hosting and domain from scratch. But briefly, in this video, I just want to show you different types of web hosting we have out there. We have Hostinja, like I said, GoDaddy, DigitalOcean, then what they all provide, they provide domain registration, they provide web hosting, they provide email accounts, SSL certificates, and the likes. Now that you've understood basic things about website design, like what the front end means and the back end, what it means to have a domain, hosting, and then different approach of building a website and the likes. So how do you get started? First thing you need to do is, as a business owner, if you want to have a website, the first thing you need to do is pick a domain name. Pick something that is memorable, short, and relevant to your business. Then you have to check the availability, whether the domain is still available. In the next video, I'll be showing exactly how you can do all this. Then you register your domain, purchase the domain from the registrar like Namecheap, GoDaddy, etc. Then buy the hosting. Select a hosting plan that fits your needs. Start with shared hosting and upgrade as you grow. Then you connect your domain to your hosting. You update your domain settings. All this I'll be showing in the next video. Then you install your website. If it's WordPress you want to use, an example of CMS, it's just all about setting it up on your cPanel. Then you get to work on it very easily. And my final advice before I end this video is, when you want to build your next website, you ensure you're opting for good design, because first impressions matter. A professional clean design builds trust and keeps visitors engaged. Therefore, you ensure you have a very good design and a mobile responsive website which is both functional on mobile phone then on desktop as well. And it of course must be a fast loading website that opens up in few seconds. Then you opt in for SEO optimization, which helps people find you easily on Google by using relevant keywords and quality content and proper meta tags. And as a business owner, if you are still wondering which development approach you want to pick, either building your website from scratch through coding, or you want to use CMS website builders to build your website, my key advice is, if you want full control over your website, if you want to get to edit your website on your own after the development, e.g., maybe you are running an e-commerce website and you have more products being uploaded that will be uploaded to your website on a frequent basis, then I will advise you go for platforms like CMS. This gives you more freedom, more control over your website. And then if you are going for a very complex project that most CMS may not be able to offer you that level of flexibility that you want, you might actually need to opt in for the coding approach, but it depends. In my next video, I'll be explaining more on the development approach you need to go for. I hope this video helped you understand the basic structure of how websites work. In this channel, I'll be dropping a lot of videos on everything related to tech, everything related to growing your business, your website online, and many other things. I'll be able to do this because I've been a website designer for the past 6-7 years. Therefore, if you need any help building your website, you can feel free to reach out to me. And if you have more questions, you can subscribe for more tutorials on this channel. If you found this video helpful, make sure you like the video and subscribe to this channel for more tutorials.